Chapter 9 of Green Mansions. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. Green Mansions by W.H. Hudson, Chapter 9. That afternoon with Rima in the forest under the mora tree had proved so delightful that I was eager for more rambles and talks with her, but the variable little witch had a great surprise in store for me. All her wild natural gaiety had unaccountably gone out of her. When I walked in the shade, she was there, but no longer as the blithe, fantastic being, bright as an angel, innocent and affectionate as a child, tricksy as a monkey, that had played at hide-and-seek with me. She was now my shy, silent attendant, only occasionally visible, and appearing then like the mysterious maid I had found reclining among the ferns, who had melted away mist-like from sight as I gazed. When I called, she would not now answer as formerly, but in response would appear in sight as if to assure me that I had not been forsaken, and after a few moments her grey shadowy form would once more vanish among the trees. The hope that as her confidence increased and she grew accustomed to talk with me, she would be brought to reveal the story of her life had to be abandoned, at all events for the present. I must, after all, get my information from Nuflo or rest in ignorance. The old man was out for the greater part of each day with his dogs, and from these expeditions he brought back nothing that I could see but a few nuts and fruits, some thin bark for his cigarettes, and an occasional handful of haima gum to perfume the hut of an evening. After I had wasted 3 days in vainly trying to overcome the girl's now inexplicable shyness, I resolved to give for a while my undivided attention to her grandfather to discover, if possible, where he went and how he spent his time. My new game of hide-and-seek with Nuflo instead of with Rima began on the following morning. He was cunning, so was I. Going out and concealing myself among the bushes, I began to watch the hut. That I could elude Rima's keener eyes I doubted, but that did not trouble me. She was not in harmony with the old man, and would do nothing to defeat my plan. I had not been long in my hiding-place before he came out, followed by his 2 dogs, and going to some distance from the door he sat down on a log. For some minutes he smoked, then rose, and after looking cautiously round, slipped away among the trees. I saw that he was going off in the direction of the low range of rocky hills south of the forest. I knew that the forest did not extend far in that direction, and thinking that I should be able to catch a sight of him on its borders, I left the bushes and ran through the trees as fast as I could to get ahead of him. Coming to where the wood was very open, I found that a barren plain beyond it, 1/4 of a mile wide, separated it from the range of hills. Thinking that the old man might cross this open space, I climbed into a tree to watch. After some time he appeared, walking rapidly among the trees, the dogs at his heels, but not going towards the open plain. He had, it seemed, after arriving at the edge of the wood, changed his direction and was going west, still keeping in the shelter of the trees. When he had been gone about 5 minutes, I dropped to the ground and started in pursuit. Once more I caught sight of him through the trees, and I kept him in sight for about 20 minutes longer. Then he came to a broad strip of dense wood, which extended into and through the range of hills, and here I quickly lost him. Hoping still to overtake him, I pushed on, but after struggling through the underwood for some distance, and finding the forest growing more difficult as I progressed, I at last gave him up. Turning eastward, I got out of the wood to find myself at the foot of a steep, rough hill, one of the range which the wooded valley cut through at right angles. It struck me that it would be a good plan to climb the hill to get a view of the forest belt in which I had lost the old man, and after walking a short distance I found a spot which allowed of an ascent. The summit of the hill was about 300 feet above the surrounding level, and did not take me long to reach. It commanded a fair view, and I now saw that the belt of wood beneath me extended right through the range, and on the south side opened out into an extensive forest. If that is your destination, thought I, old fox, your secrets are safe from me. It was still early in the day, and a slight breeze tempered the air and made it cool and pleasant on the hilltop after my exertions. My scramble through the wood had fatigued me somewhat, and resolving to spend some hours on that spot, I looked round for a comfortable resting place. I soon found a shady spot on the west side of an upright block of stone, where I could recline at ease on a bed of lichen. Here, with shoulders resting against the rock, I sat thinking of Rima, alone in her wood today, with just a tinge of bitterness in my thoughts, which made me hope that she would miss me as much as I missed her, and in the end I fell asleep. When I woke it was past noon, and the sun was shining directly on me. Standing up to gaze once more on the prospect, I noticed a small wreath of white smoke issuing from a spot about the middle of the forest belt beneath me, and I instantly divined that Nuflo had made a fire at that place, and I resolved to surprise him in his retreat. When I got down to the base of the hill, the smoke could no longer be seen, but I had studied the spot well from above, and had singled out a large clump of trees on the edge of the belt as a starting point, and after a search of half an hour, I succeeded in finding the old man's hiding place. First I saw smoke again through an opening in the trees, then a small rude hut of sticks and palm leaves. Approaching cautiously, I peered through a crack and discovered old Nuflo engaged in smoking some meat over a fire, and at the same time grilling some bones on the coals. He had captured a coatimundi, an animal somewhat larger than a tame tomcat, with a long snout and long ringed tail. One of the dogs was gnawing at the animal's head, and the tail and the feet were also lying on the floor, among the old bones and rubbish that littered it. Stealing round, I suddenly presented myself at the opening to his den, when the dogs rose up with a growl, and Nuflo instantly leaped to his feet, knife in hand. "Ha ha ha! Old man," I cried with a laugh, "I have found you at one of your vegetarian repasts, and your grass-eating dogs as well." He was disconcerted and suspicious, but when I explained that I had seen a smoke while on the hills, where I had gone to search for a curious blue flower which grew in such places, and had made my way to it to discover the cause, he recovered confidence and invited me to join him at his dinner of roast meat. I was hungry by this time, and not sorry to get animal food once more. Nevertheless, I ate this meat with some disgust, as it had a rank taste and smell, and it was also unpleasant to have those evil-looking dogs savagely gnawing at the animal's head and feet at the same time. "You see," said the old hypocrite, wiping the grease from his moustache, "this is what I am compelled to do in order to avoid giving offence. My granddaughter is a strange being, sir, as you have perhaps observed." "That reminds me," I interrupted, "that I wish you to relate her history to me. She is, as you say, strange, and has speech and faculties unlike ours, which shows that she comes of a different race." "No, no, her faculties are not different from ours. They are sharper, that is all. It pleases the All-Powerful to give more to some than to others. Not all the fingers on the hand are alike. You will find a man who will take up a guitar and make it speak, while "All that I understand," I broke in again, "but her origin, her history, that is what I wish to hear." "And that, sir, is precisely what I am about to relate. Poor child, she was left on my hands by her sainted mother, my daughter, sir, who perished young. Now, her birthplace, where she was taught letters and the catechism by the priest, was in an unhealthy situation. It was hot and wet, always wet, a place suited to frogs rather than to human beings. At length, thinking that it would suit the child better, for she was pale and weakly, to live in a drier atmosphere among mountains, I brought her to this district. For this, señor, and for all I have done for her, I look for no reward here, but to that place where my daughter has got her foot. Not, sir, on the threshold, as you might think, but well inside. For, after all, it is to the authorities above, in spite of some blots which we see in their administration, that we must look for justice. Frankly, sir, that is the whole story of my granddaughter's origin." "Ah, yes," I returned. "Your story explains why she can call a wild bird to her hand, and touch a venomous serpent with her bare foot and receive no harm." "Doubtless you are right," said the old dissembler. "Living alone in the wood, she had only God's creatures to play and make friends with, and wild animals, I have heard it said, know those who are friendly towards them." "You treat her friends badly," said I, kicking the long tail of the coatimundi away with my foot, and regretting that I had joined in this repast. "Señor, you must consider that we are only what Heaven made us. When all this was formed," he continued, opening his arms wide to indicate the entire creation, "the person who concerned himself with this matter gave seeds and fruits and nectar of flowers for the sustentation of his small birds. But we have not their delicate appetites. The more robust stomach which he gave to man cries out for meat. Do you understand? But of all this, friend, not one word to Rima." I laughed scornfully. "Do you think me such a child, old man, as to believe that Rima, that little sprite, does not know that you are an eater of flesh? Rima, who is everywhere in the wood, seeing all things, even if I lift my hand against a serpent, she herself unseen." "But, sir, if you will pardon my presumption, you are saying too much. She does not come here, and therefore cannot see that I eat meat. In all that wood where she flourishes and sings, where she is in her house and garden, and mistress of the creatures, even of the small butterfly with painted wings, there, sir, I hunt no animal, nor will my dogs chase any animal there. That is what I meant when I said that if an animal should stumble against their legs, they would lift up their noses and pass on without seeing it. For in that wood there is one law, the law that Rima imposes, and outside of it a different law." "I am glad that you have told me this," I replied. "The thought that Rima might be near, and unseen herself, look in upon us, feeding with the dogs, and, like dogs, on flesh, was one which greatly troubled my mind." He glanced at me in his usual quick, cunning way. "Ah, señor, you have that feeling too, after so short a time with us. Consider, then, what it must be for me, unable to nourish myself on gums and fruitlets, and that little sweetness made by wasps out of flowers, when I am compelled to go far away and eat secretly to avoid giving offence." It was hard, no doubt, but I did not pity him. Secretly I could only feel anger against him for refusing to enlighten me, while making such a presence of openness, and I also felt disgusted with myself for having joined him in his rank repast. But dissimulation was necessary, and so, after conversing a little more on indifferent topics, and thanking him for his hospitality, I left him alone to go on with his smoky task. On my way back to the lodge, fearing that some taint of Nuflo's evil-smelling den and dinner might still cling to me, I turned aside to where a streamlet in the wood widened and formed a deep pool, to take a plunge in the water. After drying myself in the air, and thoroughly ventilating my garments by shaking and beating them, I found an open, shady spot in the wood, and threw myself on the grass to wait for evening, before returning to the house. By that time the sweet, warm air would have purified me. Besides, I did not consider that I had sufficiently punished Rima for her treatment of me. She would be anxious for my safety, perhaps even looking for me everywhere in the wood. It was not much to make her suffer one day, after she had made me miserable for 3, and perhaps when she had discovered that I could exist without her society, she would begin to treat me less capriciously. So ran my thoughts as I rested on the warm ground, gazing up into the foliage, green as young grass in the lower shady parts, and above luminous with the bright sunlight, and full of the murmuring sounds of insect life. My every action, word, thought, had my feeling for Rima as a motive. Why, I began to ask myself, was Rima so much to me? It was easy to answer that question, because nothing so exquisite had ever been created. All the separate and fragmentary beauty and melody and graceful motion found scattered throughout nature were concentrated and harmoniously combined in her. How various, how luminous, how divine she was! A being for the mind to marvel at, to admire continually, finding some new grace and charm every hour, every moment, to add to the old. And there was, besides, the fascinating mystery surrounding her origin to arouse and keep my interest in her continually active. That was the easy answer I returned to the question I had asked myself. But I knew that there was another answer, a reason more powerful than the first. But I could no longer thrust it back, or hide its shining face with the dull leaden mask of mere intellectual curiosity. Because I loved her! Loved her as I had never loved before, never could love any other being, with a passion which had caught something of her own brilliance and intensity, making a former passion look dim and commonplace in comparison, a feeling known to everyone, something old and worn out, a weariness even to think of. From these reflections I was roused by the plaintive three-syllable call of an evening bird, a night-jar common in these woods, and was surprised to find that the sun had set and the woods already shadowed with the twilight. I started up and began hurriedly walking homewards, thinking of Rima, and was consumed with impatience to see her. And as I drew near to the house, walking along a narrow path which I knew, I suddenly met her face to face. Doubtless she had heard my approach, and instead of shrinking out of the path and allowing me to pass on without seeing her, as she would have done on the previous day, she had sprung forward to meet me. I was struck with wonder at the change in her as she came with a swift, easy motion, like a flying bird, her hands outstretched as if to clasp mine, her lips parted in a radiant, welcoming smile, her eyes sparkling with joy. I started forward to meet her, but had no sooner touched her hands than her countenance changed, and she shrunk back trembling, as if the touch had chilled her warm blood, and moving some feet away, she stood with downcast eyes, pale and sorrowful as she had seemed yesterday. In vain I implored her to tell me the cause of this change, and of the trouble she evidently felt. Her lips trembled as if with speech, but she made no reply, and only shrunk further away when I attempted to approach her, and at length, moving aside from the path, she was lost to sight in the dusky leafage. I went on alone and sat outside for some time, until old Nuflo returned from his hunting, and only after he had gone in and had made the fire burn up did Rima make her appearance, silent and constrained as ever. End of chapter.